I wanted to find out a little bit more about what a community editor does, and in particular, what do you have to deliver for your bosses? What do they what's your target, if you like, or are there targets that you have to kind of meet?
It's kind of in a state of flux a little bit, because I've only been doing this job as communities editor for nearly a month. We're in the process of, in fact Shane and I started before I got this job quite kind of fortuitously, and then sort of bonus, because we didn't know he was going to be moving. But we just moved blogs onto WordPress in June, and so our next big focus was going to be our community tools and what we were going to do about my Telegraph, and how we could, where we'd got to, really taking stock of what had happened over the last 2 years and what we want to do next. So I'm in the middle of doing that, sort of presenting to my bosses where I feel community should go, what I feel is working, what hasn't worked so well, doing a kind of general review. Then my role is very much a mix of trying to make sure we have the right tech and the right tools for readers to use. And I do that in conjunction with the technical development people who know much more about these things than I do. But sometimes people pitch ideas to me and I take them up to tech, and sometimes they come by tech and they bring them down to me and get a sort of editorial perspective on what I feel readers will need and what other journalists will need. So it's partly that, rolling out new commenting boxes or new polling systems. It's partly looking at areas of the site where we might develop community stuff. So there've been pockets of community on the Telegraph, and we discontinued that particular group for some reason. The journalist who ran it has left or something, but we know there's some interest in community, or they've done a Q&A and it's got a really big response, but we don't yet have a group of people blogging about, say, gardening, or there's sort of little pockets of it around. And it's going to those departments and working with them, talking to them about what they might like to do. And then speaking to the community directly, blogging, getting involved with them, emailing them. They quite often email me with worries either about how do I deal with negative comments on my blog, or I'm unhappy with the way you moderated my blog. So it's that kind of daily stuff. The moderation is done by a team of people based at our customer services office, and they deal with all the sort of password requests and the regular moderation stuff.
Journalists?
They're not journalists, no. And I've been training them as well. We moved the moderation there at the beginning of this year. So part of my role has been kind of working with them to explain how we see community, how we see the rules, a bit of legal training obviously. But yes, it can be quite a tough job, so supporting them if they have a blog they're not sure about, coming me up and we'll discuss it. So it's sort of quite a wide range of things, but I'm finding that if I could do, obviously the stuff like I've forgotten my password or something, it's slightly dull, you don't want to do too much of that. But if I can do some quite seemingly menial, just low-level interaction with people while still doing the strategy, it works quite well, because then you have a sense of what the community are actually talking about that day and what they care about that day. And if there's stupid things like, tiny technical thing isn't working, tags aren't working, something, if I know that, I can do something about it. If I'm doing too much strategy and meeting my bosses and telling them where we go, I can get a bit disconnected from the community. So it's always a challenge to try and do a bit of everything, and then to try and fit in a bit of kind of creativity and blogging along the way. But yeah.
And to what extent do you look at how many people are staying within the website? Is that something you're kind of conscious of?
Yeah, I do have traffic measuring tools. The most interesting one for me is that my Telegraph is part of the site where readers stay the longest. So length of time on site, which is a sort of regular metric, is quite high on my Telegraph. So that's.
Is that something you're trying to produce throughout the brand? Is that something you're trying to spread, that kind of stickiness?
Yeah, I think so. It's in a way, it's a more interesting kind of engagement than drive-by traffic. The drive-by, to stories on Drudge, and we get a whole load of traffic to a blog or something. It's excellent because we've got a big number. We've got a lot of people reading your stuff, and most journalists want people to read their stuff, so that's good. But in a way, it's more satisfying when you have readers sticking around, and commercial like it. It's obviously easier to monetize to people who are there actually wanting to stay than people who come in, read one article and go straight back to Google or something else. So I think definitely community has a big part in stickiness and branding and stuff. But really, at the same time of talking about it as a branding exercise, what keeps the other readers there is each other. Time and time again, if the text's broken or the site's gone down or they've had an argument with somebody, they've even gone off and set up little communities, a Google group for Telegraph refugees, that's one. And they've gone off for an afternoon and they've all come back because the people they really want to speak to are on my Telegraph. So it's those relationships that are really the most valuable thing, that they play out in a metric that's length of time on site or whatever, but it's quite hard to measure that importance, but I think that's quite crucial.
A little bit off message, but do you have a very clear picture of who these people are, their identities?
The people who really engage, I do, because a lot of them have been there for a long time, and I know them quite well, and I probably know quite a lot about their grandchildren and know them. Or what we've got a few students, what they're studying, or what they're stuff in their lives. Others, the ones who pop up every now and again and say, I don't normally comment, but I'd like to leave a comment in this case, they're harder to really reach out to and try and understand why they're not commenting more, why they're not engaged more, what they're really interested in, what is it that we're not giving them that they really want. So those are the people that I'd kind of like to know more about, and they're quite hard to reach. I guess it's the age-old thing that you ask people to fill in a survey in order to get information. The keen people who fill in the survey, great, you know loads about them. It's the people who nearly filled in the survey but just didn't quite get to the end of it that you really want to know about them.